Today, no complex plots, no bloody death, let's just gossip. This story is a bit different, definitely not the usual style for my channel, but trust me, it's a fascinating one. I'm also really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the main characters because, honestly, they are so hard to define. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. Every Saturday night, I'll see you there with spooky stories and bizarre cases. Let's take a trip back to 2018 in Yongkang, Zhejiang province, where we meet Mr. Chung. At 48 years old, Mr. Chung was a millionaire, having made his fortune in the building materials business with his wife. Life was sweet, happy, wealthy, and problem-free. But as they say, middle age hits, the spark fades, and certain urges start to surface. Yup, Mr. Chung had an affair. Back then, QQ was booming, quickly becoming the most popular chat app in China. Of course, Chung jumped on board with the trend. Before long, he received a friend request from a stranger. Feeling curious, Chung accepted. This stranger turned out to be a woman named Zhan Yun, a 33-year-old from Hangzhou. She explained that she was recently divorced after her husband cheated on her, and now she was living in Yongkang with her child, running a small business. With no friends around, she was feeling lonely and had randomly added Chung. Zhan Yun's sob story tugged at Cheng's heartstrings, and they started chatting more often. But Cheng wasn't completely sold yet. I mean, it's the internet. You never know who you are really talking to, right? What if she's a scammer? Well, what a coincidence. The very next day, Zhan Yun invited Cheng to a video chat. On the call, she turned out to be gorgeous, full of charm, and had a bubbly personality that made Cheng's heart skip a bit. Now that he had seen her in the flesh, he let his guard down a little. Their chats grew longer, and the bond between them deepened. A month later, Cheng had a business trip to Hangzhou. Naturally, he reached out to Zhan Yun and, what do you know, she happened to be in Hangzhou too. In Chinese culture, we believe in destiny, and Cheng thought, wow, this is our fate. So they arranged to meet up. Sunshine, beautiful views, and the serene waters of West Lake. Cheng and Zhan Yun rowed a little boat, taking in the sunset like a couple straight out of a love story. After dinner, they checked into a hotel and, well, broke their marriage vows. The happy times were always short-lived, and once Mr. Cheng calmed down, he felt deeply conflicted. On one hand, he genuinely liked Zhan Yun and didn't want to let this relationship go. But on the other hand, fears kicked in. As a millionaire, he had seen his fair share of shady deals and shady people, so he worried Zhan Yun might blackmail him later and ruin his family and reputation. To prevent any trouble, Cheng made Zhan Yun agree to a no-strings-attached affair. Zhan Yun agreed. With everything seemingly under control, Cheng started seeing Zhan Yun more often. But as careful as he was, life always has its surprises. Like an unexpected pregnancy. In 2009, Zhan Yun called Cheng in a panic, saying she was pregnant. Cheng didn't believe it at first. After all, Zhan Yun was a medical professional and had sworn that she was taking all necessary precautions. Now she was claiming it was an accident. Cheng's alarm bell started ringing. Did the blackmail finally come? The pregnancy news put a serious strain on their relationship. Cheng was freaking out, invited her to the hotel for discussion. In the room, he made his stance clear. There's no way I'm marrying you, and I'm definitely not having a child with you. This cold response broke Zhan Yun's heart. Furious, she stormed out, and Mr. Cheng didn't stop her. A few days later, he found out she'd had an abortion. Little did he know, his nightmare was only just beginning. The baby was gone, and so was the spark between them. Zhan Yun claimed that the abortion had left her with lasting health issues and blamed Cheng for it. Feeling guilty, Cheng paid her off with a lump sum as compensation. But after that, Zhan Yun's temper drastically changed. She started demanding money from him regularly, threatening to expose their affair to his wife if he didn't pay up. Because of it, their relationship hit rock bottom, and Cheng decided it was time for a serious talk. In August 2009, Cheng hastily wrote up a handwritten agreement stating that he he had given Zhang Yun 145,000 yuan, and from then on, Zhang Yun had no right to interfere in his life. The agreement even mentioned it could be used in court, but whether this agreement actually holds any legal validity is still up for debate. Because Chung was worried about his reputation, he didn't involve any lawyers or witnesses. Zhang Yun signed the agreement, took the money, and left, and Chung finally breathed a sigh of relief. But their connection wasn't over. Fast forward to 2012, one day, Chung's phone rang, and he saw a familiar number pop up. His heart immediately sank. Sure enough, it was Zhang Yun. On the phone, she told him she needed 60,000 yuan and promised this would be the last time she bothered him. While Chung was hesitating, he noticed her voice was incredibly weak, and when he pressed for details, she dropped a bombshell. Ever since her abortion, her health had been going downhill, and now she only had 3 months to live. Chung was stunned. A wave of pity hit him. But at the same time, a little voice in his head reminded him of all the times Zhang Yun used her illness to blackmail him in the past. Even though he felt a bit sorry for her, Chung refused to go visit her in the hospital for a final goodbye, just quickly wired her the money and hang up. 3 months later, Chung got another call, this time from an unknown number. The caller introduced herself as Miss Tsai, one of Zhang Yun's closest friends. Apparently, she was calling to pass on Zhang Yun's dying wish. She confessed her wrongdoings, said Chung was a good man, and wished him happiness. Mr. Chung was moved by this, and on impulse, he decided to attend her funeral. But Miss Tsai advised against it, warning him that Zhang Yun's family was furious and planned to publicly expose this affair. Hearing this, Chung freaked out. This scandal was the last thing he wanted. At this point, Miss Tsai acted as a middleman, negotiated with Zhang Yun's family, who finally demanded 180,000 yuan as compensation. At that time, Chung's business wasn't doing so great, and 180,000 yuan is no small amount. But desperate to end this nightmare, he headed to the bank the very next day and wired the money, hoping this would finally be the end of it. However, Pandora's box was just opened. A few days later, another call came in, this time from Zhang Yun's younger brother, Zhang Xin, and he was not here to chit-chat. He got straight to the point, demanding another compensation. According to Zhang Xin, they have 6 siblings and the whole family relied on Zhang Yun to support them. Now that she's gone, his compensation just wasn't enough. He also denied that Miss Tsai ever mentioned the verbal agreement and threatened to tell Cheng's wife if he didn't cough up the money. Now, Cheng wasn't easily intimidated, but during their talks, Zhang Xin started pouring out his family's tragic story. As it turned out, before Zhang Yun passed away, their eldest sister and her husband had committed suicide over an affair. And while that had nothing to do with Mr. Cheng, losing 2 sisters back-to-back had dealt a huge blow to their already struggling family. And Zhang Xin's marriage was now hanging by a thread due to all the pressure. After a few more tearful phone calls, Cheng's defense finally crumbled, and he scraped together 120,000 yuan to send to Zhang Xin. But before the money even reached his account, Zhang Xin called again in a panic, saying he had accidentally killed his wife during a heated argument. Mr. Cheng felt awful. While this had nothing to do with him, but it was all tied to Zhang Yun's death, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that he shared some responsibility. So, feeling guilty, Cheng scrambled together another 300,000 yuan to help Zhang Xin cover the compensation for his wife's family. Later, as expected, Zhang Xin was arrested and thrown in jail. But the story didn't end here. Zhang Xin then committed suicide in prison. Now, I bet at this point you are probably thinking, hold on, something's fishy here. And you'd be right. This family's never-ending tragedies were just a bit too convenient. Any outsider would have suspected that something was off. But Mr. Cheng, stuck in the middle of it all, didn't question a thing. Or we can say he couldn't. It wasn't long before Zhang Xin's sister, Zhang Fei, called Cheng. She delivered the news of her brother's death and demanded another 300,000 yuan. Cheng found suspicious. Could someone really commit suicide in prison? But his concerns were quickly put to rest. Soon after, Miss Tsai also called to confirm this tragedy. Miss Tsai also warned him that Zhang Yun's old rental apartment still had her medical records here, and she offered to retrieve them for him, so the family couldn't use them as blackmail material in the future. Chen happily agreed. But in an unfortunate twist, Zhang Fei overheard the phone call. The Zhang family had already suspected Miss Hai of helping Mr. Cheng behind the scenes, and now they had proof. Furious, Zhang Fei rushed to the rental apartment to get the medical records first. And that's when things took another dark turn. Hours later, Zhang Fei called Mr. Cheng, crying hysterically. She told him that she and Miss Hai met at the apartment. Miss Hai grabbed the medical records first and made a run for it. But in her rush to escape, she was hit by a car at an intersection and killed instantly. Now Mr. Cheng was completely dumbfounded. Another death? By this point, 6 people had died, all in various accidents, each with some mysterious connection to him. He felt like the sky was falling on him. Still, despite his growing horror, Cheng tried to comfort Zhang Fei on the phone, advising her to take care of herself and not do anything rash. And, of course, he sent her another 300,000. But at this point, it wasn't the money or the death that were breaking Cheng down. It was the unbearable weight of all these secrets, with no one to confide in. The stress had taken its toll, and Mr. Cheng was a shadow of his former self, constantly on edge. His wife quickly noticed his strange behavior. She secretly checked his phone and found the messages from the Zhang family demanding money. Then she confronted him. Cheng realized there was no point in hiding it anymore. He broke down, confessing everything, apologizing profusely, and feeling deep remorse. Surprisingly, his wife didn't explode in anger. Instead, she calmly said, "The people are dead, and we're struggling too. Let's just do what we can to make it right." But don't you think their deaths are just a little too coincidental? Just as they were discussing what to do next, the phone rang again. It was Zhang Qian, the youngest of the Zhang siblings and the last one left. She was calling to inform Mr. Cheng that her sister Zhang Fei had committed suicide. This time, Mrs. Cheng overheard the call and immediately sensed that something wasn't right. She decided to investigate Zhang Fei's death. The first thought was to go to the police, but her husband hesitated. He believed all these deaths were somehow tied to him, and if they stir things up, the police would hold him accountable. Mrs. Cheng was utterly exasperated, wondering how her husband still hadn't seen through this game. In the end, the wife dragged him to the police station to report the whole saga. When she explained the chain of events to the police, it all sounded reasonable at first, but as the officers began digging deeper, cracks started to appear. They first looked into the record of Zhang Xi, the brother who had supposedly committed suicide in prison. However, no such prisoner ever existed. From there, they followed up on the Zhang family's registration records, only to find that Zhang Yun's household registration was still active. She wasn't officially dead. In fact, none of her siblings were either. That's when the police realized this was a full-blown scam, likely a well-coordinated group effort. But even with the evidence piling up, Mr. Cheng still couldn't believe it. He stubbornly declared, "I'll only believe it when Zhang Yun comes back from the dead." The officer gave him a wry smile and said, "Well, you said it." Soon, the police issued a warrant, and just in half a month, Zhang Yun was arrested in Beijing. Then, Zhang Yun requested to meet with Cheng, and the meeting was arranged at the detention center. As soon as she walked in, she burst into tears. She claimed she never intended to deceive him, and that her feelings for him were genuine from the start. However, after the abortion, Cheng's cold treatment had left her heartbroken. Blinded by anger, she came up with the idea to con him. Initially, she wasn't sure if Cheng could fall for it, but his guilty conscience did the trick, and he sent her the money. Greed, she admitted, got the better of her after that. Seeing how easily it worked, she began fabricating one death after another to keep the cash flowing. The funniest part? Every single story was made up by her alone, and every phone call was her pretending to be different people. To pull it off, she had to change her voice and mannerisms for each character. The hardest one, she confessed, was her brother Zhang Xi. She had to lower her voice and adopt a tougher tone to pass him off as a tough guy. Actually, Mr. Cheng had noticed Zhan Xin's voice was a little strange, but when Zhan Xin began pouring his heart out about the family's tragedies, that small moment of doubt was gone in a flash, and Cheng found himself sinking deeper and deeper into the lies. In the end, Mr. Cheng finally emerged from the web of deception, while Zhan Yun faced the consequences of her actions into the courtroom. Looking back at the entire process, we might think, wow, how could Mr. Cheng be so foolish? But as they say, the onlooker sees more clearly than the person in the situation. From our perspective, everything seems obvious. But for someone trapped in the middle of a scam, facing immense mental and financial pressure, and feeling some pity for the scammer, it's incredibly difficult to stay clear-headed. Actually, both sides were taking a gamble. The scammer was betting on, what if he believes me? What if he still have feelings for me or feel guilty? While Mr. Cheng was gambling with his conscience, and coincidentally, the scammer won the bet, and Mr. Cheng lost. There's one thing I really don't understand though. Zhan Yun got divorced because her husband cheated on her, which made Mr. Cheng feeling deeply sorry for her. So, he knew how much pain infidelity causes. Then how could he insist on cheating himself? Didn't he realize he was causing the same pain to his wife? That's why I said it's hard to judge him. He seems compassionate but also selfish, a mix of being pitiful and hateful. What do you think about him? Alright, that's the story for this episode. In the next video, we'll dive into some eerie stories submitted by internet users in China. Real stories, guarantee authentic. So make sure you don't miss it. See you next time. Bye bye.